Welcome to Adventures with ADHD, where I shine the spotlight on other fabulous neurodivergent people. And today I'm so glad to say I've got Victoria Russell with me. Hi, Victoria. Thanks for coming.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, good, good. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Thank you
Coming
for
along,
having me.
being on my screen. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to ask you some questions for our lovely podcast. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
So tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do.
So I'm Victoria. I am based in Oxford and I run two businesses. VGR Business Support I've been running for 8.5 years, offering accountancy and administration services. And Inspired Minds UK Consulting that I launched this year, which is business coaching and mentoring for neurodivergent entrepreneurs and startups.
Lovely. Great. Okay, so it sounds like you're fairly busy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I like to keep myself on my toes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, so tell us then, how did you find out you were neurodivergent? Tell us about your
Well,
journey.
it's a funny one because I grew up with a brother who had ADD, and I'm a child of the 80s. So in the 80s, 90s, ADHD was thought of as the hyperactive presenting behavior that my brother presented. So growing up, it didn't even enter my mind that I might be neurodivergent or have any of the symptoms. And I have a child who is ADHD. And a couple of years ago, when someone first suggested, "Do you think she has ADHD?" we did the, "Oh no, don't be silly. That's just her. That's how she is." But
Yeah.
then the more we looked and researched into it, the more we went, well, she's always done this. She's always behaved like this. She's never slept properly. She's always
Mm,
fidgeted and being hyper and like me can talk 1,000 words per minute. And as we progressed over time, the more research I did for helping her, the more of it I identified with, until one day I
right.
kind of went, oh, that explains a lot. So there was this
Yeah.
light bulb moment and I went, but I do that. You mean it's not normal to have a 3 second song on loop in your brain all night long? you know it's not
Yeah.
normal to feel this way or do that. So yeah, it was early last year, having been researching and looking into it and trying to understand it and doing various courses to understand my child for the last couple of years, that I then had the realization that I was neurodivergent as well. And actually, in hindsight, speaking to other members of the family, my sister has a child who is awaiting diagnosis, and I have a couple of half sisters who also are neurodivergent, with neurodivergent children. So it clearly runs in the
Yeah.
family. But because I didn't present in the typical way that someone with ADHD does, you didn't think that I had it. Even my own mother was like, "Oh well, but you don't do this, you don't do that." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm hyperactive in the mind, not physically in the same way." But
Yeah.
actually, the more I understand myself and the more I learn about myself, although I've got ADHD, and in my mind, a lot of my behaviors are more autistic than anything. And so that's been really interesting in the last sort of 6 months, going, okay, well, I just thought that was normal. But to me, it is normal. But
Yeah.
obviously, it's not
Yeah.
neurotypical normal. But yeah, so that's kind of
Yeah.
how it came about. And with the business, I was already volunteer mentoring, and I really love it, and I love helping people and the difference it makes. And it just made sense that I niche with neurodivergency because of all the studying and learning I've been doing over the last 2 years on the subject. I've
Yeah.
just recently completed a course on autism and supporting it, obviously how understanding myself, and a course on teaching Sen and DEI training and all that sort of stuff. So why not put all this knowledge and experience to use and use that to help other people? Hence the birth of Inspired Minds UK Consulting.
Excellent. Wow. And I know you really do love to help people, don't you? So,
I do.
um, yeah. So how your daughter is AU
Yes.
AuDHD as well. Um, so do you find now you know what's going on, do you find you're able to kind of support her even more so?
Yeah, I do. Having understanding certainly makes a difference. Hers is slightly more complex because she's got PTSD as well. Um,
Right.
but yeah, so sometimes and obviously she's a typical teenager. So with teenager for me, it with her, I tend to take the approach of pick your battles. There are just some things that are just
Yeah.
not worth arguing with her over, and other things you just have to sort of be a bit understanding and work with her on them.
Yeah.
So, for
Yeah.
example, she is not very good with her timekeeping, so we have a bit of a schedule with that. And her eating, she will forget to eat sometimes, and I'll
Mm.
forget things as well. So I'll batch prep lunches and breakfast things. So I've got a drawer in the freezer full of her favourite
Oh.
egg and bacon baps ready to go, so she can just get one out and put it in the microwave, and
Oh, wow.
there's no don't have to worry about have we got any eggs in the house, or have we remembered this, have we remembered that. The same with her lunches. She can just grab what she
Mm.
wants and go, which makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, I bet. Amazing. Really good. And where are you now on your journey? So you've recently, was it recently that you discovered you were neurodivergent?
So I realized early last year, that I was yeah, so and just trying to fight to get diagnosis is quite shocking. And
Mm.
here in our local authority, I've been refused twice to even be put on the waiting list for a referral. And my GP's response is, well, we can refer you under right to choose, but we won't support shared care, which leaves you in a situation, well, who can afford several £100s a month for medication? Not that I
Mm.
necessarily want to go on medication, but to be quite honest, for me, I manage it with sort of diet and exercise, um, and you find your own coping mechanisms and ways around things. So, for example, I allow time in my schedule. I don't I don't book a full week up with a client
Mm.
work, because I allow time, so that if I have an off day, for want of better words, then I've got that time in my the fluidity and flexibility in my schedule to allow for that and still get things done on deadline.
Yeah, great. It's some really good tips that can really help other people as well. Now, I didn't prepare you for this. Don't be too shocked. But I know when we've spoken before, your kind of passion for helping people and doing lots of like community-based things, which is quite typical of ADHD, doing lots of things that you're really passionate about. Did you say you were a rugby coach as well
In the
before?
past, when my sons played, I coached rugby and run the youth section for about 18 months. So I used to have 150 children every Sunday morning, which was
Wow.
interesting. I wasn't coaching every single one of those, but I was responsible for everybody there.
Yeah.
I've always been very much put your money where your mouth is. Don't complain about something unless you'd be willing to do it. And I've done the PTA, I've done the rugby
It's,
club, I've held positions within our networking group, so I do that now. And next year, I'm launching a non-profit with some friends. So yeah, I'd like to help people and get involved.
yeah. Yeah. And I think what you said before about having time in your diary that, time without seeing clients or whatever in order to manage your energy, is so important, especially when there's so many other things going on.
It is, and it's also self-care is really important. That's one thing I've learned. Um, my daughter, for example, goes through a cycle. She'll show symptoms of burnout roughly once every 6 weeks. So
Right.
we're learning to identify that in her, and just it was just difficult with a teenager, but getting her to stop and slow down. And the same with myself. So, for example, I treat myself to have my nails done every month. That's part of my self-care. When we go to the gym 3 times a week, I like to have a sauna afterwards. So it's obviously not always those things, but it's just listening to your body. And if you need a day where you have to chill and you don't feel like you've been as productive, it's telling yourself that that's okay. Because I used to give
Mm.
myself such a hard time if I felt like I had a day where I didn't achieve anything. And now I'm just like, actually, no, that's all right. It's what you need.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes we're hardest on ourselves and we don't need to
Yeah.
be.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I just wonder if we would be as hard on other people as we are on ourselves. And
Well,
I don't think we
exactly.
would.
No, we wouldn't.
Yeah.
If someone had an off
Yeah.
day or an off afternoon and they didn't feel they'd been productive. Actually, there's times when I don't feel like I've been productive because I'm doing lots of little things. And I look back and go, oh, did I really achieve that today? Um,
Yeah.
when my children were younger, I used to have a coping mechanism. And again, I didn't know I was neurodiverse then. But so I would make a to-do list and then I would go, right, I'll do 3 things and I'll have a cup of tea. And then I'll do another 3 things and have a cup of tea. And that was how I got through the day. So that
Yeah.
was my treat, my reward, was because it would be very easy to just sit there and have a cup of tea and not do anything. And so that was how I got through the housework and
Yeah.
the laundry. I used to have really bad executive dysfunction, really struggle with it. And that was my
Mm.
coping mechanism.
Yeah. And you kind of created coping mechanisms without even knowing what you were coping with,
Yeah, oh,
which is what,
100%.
yeah. Yeah, so it's good to notice that, and I think what you said about noticing the little things, because we can be very quick to dismiss, well, I didn't do anything, but when you look at it, actually, I did 5 little things, which are not so little.
Which all add up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that awareness and recognizing what we do, I think, is really key, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, nice. So I realise throughout your what you've been saying, you have been giving really good tips and advice for people that are neurodivergent, which is always great. Do you have any other tips and advice that you would give to someone who's maybe just realised they're neurodivergent themselves?
Do you know what? For me, it's just don't is to basically give yourself a break.
Mm,
When you do realize you're neurodivergent, there's a lot of unpacking that goes on in that, a lot of emotional unpacking, and you kind of go through a feeling of grief because an anger and
mm,
you have a sense of relief that you understand, but then your anger because why did no one else spot this before, and then you grieve for maybe the life that you could have had or the things that you could have done differently. So yeah, so my biggest bit of advice at that point is just give yourself a break. you know
mm,
don't give yourself a hard time. It's not your fault or necessarily anyone's fault that it wasn't picked up on. I think certainly if you're of a certain age and I didn't never realize I was masking.
mm.
I never realized that the way that I was feeling in certain situations wasn't normal and that other people weren't feeling like that. You just presume that everyone is. So
Yeah.
yeah, just give yourself a break. That would be my biggest bit of advice at that point.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and I think that's the key, because like I said, a lot of us have spent a lifetime beating ourselves up
Oh,
metaphorically,
100%.
and it doesn't help us. It
No.
doesn't. Um, Masking. So what do you now know about masking? Because you said you didn't know you were masking. What have you learned from that?
Oh my God, that's a question, isn't it? Do you know what? I realize in my day-to-day life, I mask so much. And I suppose it's easier for me to associate it with my daughter. So she masks a lot at school. So um, I had to go and see her school counsellor last week. And he mentioned that it wasn't until his third session with her that he realized that she was neurodivergent because she was masking and presenting so well and presenting quite mature for her age that he was a bit like, why have they referred her to me? What's going
mm,
on? And it took a while for her to open up and let that slip. So it is quite normal for a neurodivergent to put on a front and behave a certain way, or a way they think they need to behave in public, which isn't necessarily their natural way. Um,
mm.
and yeah, so, and I think over time, and you know, it's funny because I can remember now when I think back, like at primary school, being told, sit down, stop talking so much, don't do this sort of this. I never realised that I fidgeted as much until I think back to what my school life was like. I was like, oh my God, yeah, I always used to be like that. But,
Yeah,
yeah, little things.
yeah. And over time, it's quite usual to kind of squash ourselves down, isn't it, to cover up the fidgeting or
Oh,
the,
100. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, yeah, which is sad, I think, because I think it's such a natural thing for us to do. If your body needs to move, it needs to move, and for the schools to, be like, you must sit still and look forward and listen,
And I
oh,
had the added thing when I was at primary school. And again, I was a child, grew up in the 80s. I was left-handed. So my first few years in school, the teachers I had were trying to force me to write with my right hand until I
wow,
think I was about 7 or 8. I had a class teacher who luckily was ambidextrous, who,
ambidextrous.
yeah,
Yeah,
and he encouraged me to use my left hand because I was left-handed. And that was the point where my schoolwork, suddenly it was much easier for me because I was able to do what was natural rather than, so I can write with my right hand a little bit, but that's not natural
yeah,
to me. And I think masking is a bit like that in some ways, because obviously
yeah,
it's natural to do one way, but you're being forced to behave in the other. So if you think about the extra energy that's involved with trying to write with your right hand when it's not natural, it's the same with masking. You're using more energy up to try and behave and come across a certain way, which is
yeah,
the neurotypical way of behaving that's expected of
yeah. That's such a good example with the left-handedness and how much energy it takes to do something that's not natural. And what do you know of the consequences of masking, of covering up your true self?
do you know what, it just, I think certainly for a long time it affected my mental health. And um again, going back to not knowing that I was neurodivergent, in 2022, I had bariatric surgery because I was heavily overweight and it was affecting my health. And what I now know is that was because I was eating for dopamine hits, rather, because of being low dopamine, and not understanding myself. So
Mm,
just even things like that, not knowing my neurodivergency and not understanding it had an effect on my health in that respect. And there are a lot of people who do that, who don't realize they're neurodivergent, that end up overweight because they've got low dopamine and they're after those
mm,
hits.
yeah, yeah, God, yeah. I mean, I've lost a couple of stone recently. I've really examined my relationship, thank you, with food and alcohol and whatever else I put into my body. And the examination, that I've been doing, a lot of it was seeking that dopamine through
Oh
food
yeah.
and drink.
My late 20s, early 30s, we did go out to the club every week and have a few beers and or ciders or whatever. And now I very rarely drink. Most of the
Mm.
time I'll have a glass of lemonade or some squash. Um, this is with you can't see it, but my big Stanley on the go. Um, but part of that is because where I've had the surgery, I don't enjoy drinking because it gives me acid reflux. Um,
Oh, okay.
but then I never the less I drank as I got older, the more I realized that I didn't enjoy being drunk or how it made me feel. And
Mm.
yeah, I just didn't get the enjoyment from it, and so I'd rather not. So I do have once in a blue moon I'll have a rum and lemonade, but other than that I don't really drink.
Yeah, yeah. And so post-surgery, how are you feeling now?
I I'm really good. So I'm what, 27, 28 months post surgery, something like that. I lost 8 stone,
Wow.
and then I've maintained for about 18 months. I have gained about half a stone, but weight loss isn't a straight line, and that's perfectly
Mm,
normal. Um, but I'm at a weight I'm comfortable and a size I'm comfortable. And that was another thing, we talk back to being so hard on yourself. I used to be really have a lot of negative self-talk, and
mm,
I felt so unhappy in myself, and that was one of the decisions as to why I had the surgery. It's not for everybody, but it was the right thing for me, and
mm,
it's made a huge difference to my life, and I'm a
mm.
different person now to who I was a couple of years ago.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story
No
and
worries.
so many great tips as well that I know the listeners will really benefit from. So in terms of your business, where can people find you?
So VGR Business Support is vgrbusinesssupport.co.uk, and Inspired Minds UK Consulting's nice and easy, imuc.co.uk.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming along and sharing your
Thank you for having me.
story.
It's been
And
lovely.
yeah, and I know our listeners will get a lot from it.